Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Tech Talk. With me today, I have mentor Jinx, as well as mentors Ben and Zekrom. Say hi, everybody.
Hello,
Hello.
guys.
Hello.
So today we have a topic. It is facial recognition and everything that goes with it. So many people may be somewhat familiar with facial recognition. At this point, we have it in lots of our technology. You might open up your phone using your face. You might use a variety of different apps that scan your face to put funny filters on it. Zoom, for example, Snapchat, of course, all these other ones. And what we're going to talk about today is what is facial recognition, what is being done with it now, and what might be done with it in the future, and if there's any implications we can draw from that. So, with that being said, let's talk about where we are now. First, I have a question for some of the guests with me today. Does anybody here use their face to open up their phone, unlock it?
Absolutely
Me?
not.
I do not either.
I use
Jinx?
it,
Jinx
yes.
uses it.
But after the COVID-19, everybody wear the mask, and that feature is not very usable.
No. Yeah, that's like I never used it myself because it was always easy enough to just like type in a password. I used the fingerprint myself, but yeah, I always depending on the phone you have. Sometimes it wasn't too good. Sometimes exactly you have a scarf on, you have a hood, your hair is different or something. I don't know. There's a variety of you wearing sunglasses. There's a variety of different things that kind of mess it up. So it was never too useful, but um, I don't know. I think there's probably good reason to not use it for like privacy concerns.
Yeah, I
Um,
was about to say in terms of the privacy, now it's gotten better, but I've seen videos of people literally take someone's phone and you can across the room get it to open up.
yeah,
Um,
that's
that was at the very beginning. And then beyond that, it comes down to a question of like what biometric data is protected legally here in the United States. So there was a case with like the fingerprint where someone was legally required to give up their fingerprint to police in a time when they weren't legally required to give up their password.
yeah, yeah. So that's an excellent case of like we have these loopholes in laws that have not kept up with technology. So you were just referencing a situation in which um, you're legally not required to give your password to police because passwords existed at the time that law was created, but the biometric data of your fingerprint and how it can be used functionally as a password was not like that. Use of technology wasn't in place when the laws were created, and facial recognition does it or does it not go with that? I don't know if we know. I don't know of any cases where that's been tested in court. I mean, I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if it has been. I'm not aware of it myself.
I think the fingerprint though is a good sort of example of what potential problems we could have in the future with facial recognition and how something that's new and evolving can not be protected the same way something that existed when laws were created is or are.
And also, facial data kind of falls into the same trap that a lot of data on the internet now falls into, is that in order for companies that use facial data to actually power their services, you need a lot of facial data. And if you're trying to train, facial recognition software, you need to actually get a lot of faces in the first place in order to train the AI that's powering that app and make it actually work properly. And so you kind of have the trade-off that shows up all the time in AI between data and privacy. If you have lots of one, you're not going to have too much of the other.
Mm-hmm. And I believe we saw that with Flickr in that article, which I believe is being shown on screen. They use 3.3 million photos from Flickr to train an AI. Now, those are publicly available. People have just publicly put those images out on the internet. But imagine a big company like Google or Facebook. There's no way, pun intended, that Facebook isn't using your face to train their own internal softwares.
Yeah, and if they are using those data, you are very hard to tell they are using it.
Mm-hmm.
And people aren't really thinking about it also. Like even when you don't know the difference between whether or not your face is being used, there's also people who aren't even thinking about it as a possibility. And so, the problem isn't getting addressed enough.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
beyond,
go ahead.
Okay, beyond privacy from like a big company or the government, there's also a privacy fact in sort of the future from just other regular people. We already see services popping up. I have one pulled up now. It's called PimEyes, and it's a public image like reverse search, sort of like Google search for faces. So you can publicly, anyone can go on the site, put a photo of anyone they want on it, and find other pictures of that person across the net. So
wow.
That's that completely erases internet privacy if you keep a public, like a public profile connected to your face.
Yeah, so I think we just started looking at essentially what all of this points to with facial recognition, and probably what we were all looking at, the way we were all thinking of looking at it today, which is how it pertains to privacy. So with facial recognition, the big concern that people have is privacy. It can be a cool, useful tool. Some people like to use it to open up their phones. Many people use it in Snapchat, maybe used some of the other various apps that, it'll make you look like you're much older than you were, or what you looked like when you were a baby. You get to swap faces with people. Those apps are fun, but who's to say they're not taking data regarding your face and adding it to a database that's used and to train various AIs. And I think there's even been a lot of instances in which it was shown that that's what they were being used for. And the big problem being, how do we know when our data is being used? And even if we did know, do we have any laws that protect it? There's not much protection as far as it goes right now. You were just talking about how people's publicly available pictures on Flickr, in this case, what is it, out of 3.3 million photos on Flickr, they were used to train an AI without anybody's consent. You can imagine that in some way that live broadcasts, news reports, you're a spectator at a sporting event, in some way people may be able to use that in the future to train AI. And what is the ethics of that? What is the legality of that? That data probably not nearly as useful as Flickr because of the resolution, and also you can trace it back to a user account. But regardless, all that's out there, and you have huge tech companies who are just taking this in. So, Facebook for years, even before facial recognition was on people's radar, would suggest like, oh, do you want to tag so-and-so in a picture? And the only reason they know that is because they've built a database of what that individual person looks like. And they just comb through every photo and say who is in this picture, who is with who. And, you don't have any ability to know what that data they have is about you.
And that sort of connection between what they know and now what they are like taking in terms of facial recognition, I think is the really dangerous part. Because if we have like I personally maintain several email addresses for different uses. But if I accidentally use one email for I don't know, if I use like an email that I use for like Reddit on a site like Facebook where it takes my picture, then somebody on Reddit later might be able to identify me based on my face, if that makes sense. Like that.
Yeah, it's not that they readily have that information. It's that because of the databases created, there is a link now between your face is linked to your Facebook's linked to your email address is linked to that Reddit account. There is a direct connection, as long as someone stores that data between your face and that account, which maybe you don't mind, but a lot of people would.
Yeah, like the idea that, again, with these, like, I want to say anonymous, because when you make a Reddit account, you do it sort of anonymously in a way. It's not really truly anonymous because of these invisible links. But I could see a future where someone could take a picture of me and see all of those links laid out before them, so they could see, oh, he has an account on Reddit, he has an account on this site and that site. And that's even on a hardware level.
And now that you mentioned that, I remember even years back, I believe it was in Russia, someone made an app, and that app already had, you can imagine Russia in many cases is not going to have some of the privacy protections that we have, and this app already had a trained database, and it was to the extent that you could walk through the street, aim your phone at a person, aim your camera at the person, and it would identify that individual. You could see their name, you could see their social media profiles, all this different stuff. And this is years ago. This isn't in the future. And they were just able to build that database because, they don't have as much privacy probably built into their laws, maybe built into their social media platforms. People don't use Facebook to the same extent in Russia that we do. They kind of have an intranet, so it's called a VK, but so that's like effectively Russian Facebook. So a lot of that data was taken in from VK, and they created this app that, you could certainly imagine you wouldn't want people to just know your name and everything about you just by taking a picture of you on the street.
And yeah, also, that can be kind of shifting away from big companies a little bit here, but there were some examples of articles published where researchers claimed to be able to create neural networks that could predict whether or not a person was going to become a criminal in the future based on their face and nothing else, pretty much. Maybe some other data about their from their social media profiles, but primarily based on facial characteristics, which is kind of interesting to think about. Intuitively, it doesn't even seem like that's really possible, but then again, it's hard to say for sure. Either way, what that runs into the problem of is bias, first of all. You don't know if the pictures that it's being trained on are fully representative of, every single possible minority group and the exact proportions that they represent in society and all that. There's a lot of variables that go into these algorithms, and you can't see everything that happens as you're making it necessarily. So you have to you're tasked with something that's pretty much impossible, and that leads to, inevitably you're going to come up with you're not going to reach a truly unbiased conclusion.
Yeah. Now, on the element there that you said about how it could predict if somebody would become a criminal. Now, obviously, that's sort of troublesome because you can never be 100% sure until they become a criminal. It obviously could have some biases, stuff like that. But in terms of using facial recognition to identify and find criminals, that is a possible good use for it, so to say. The problem I see is that unless the person is already in the system, so to say, you bring up other privacy concerns where regular ordinary people would then have to register their face, that creates concerns. But in terms of finding people, it's very good at that.
Yeah.
If you get a driver's license, you have to take a picture, right? The
That's a very
government
good point.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, anybody who has any kind of driver's license or you know, some kind of governmental ID, uh, they're gonna need your picture. I needed to take my picture when I got a lift ticket for for the ski lift, so they have my picture. Like you can see how many different like places where you're just kind of leaking this data, which in the past never really existed because you know, at some point we didn't have cameras, or we had cameras but they weren't digital. We had digital cameras but they weren't on the internet. Now we're there. So we need to start thinking about what it is we want facial recognition to do and not to do, because it is a powerful tool. It is useful. Like some people find something as simple as being able to unlock their phone with their face a really nice convenience. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only problem is who's to say what our privacy is and who's to say what like our rights to our data is. So like some excellent ways that this technology can be very useful, or it could be useful for finding people fighting crime, but if done wrong, then it's also very dangerous in that way, because then it could be misidentifying people or a whole variety of different things. And you could imagine you don't want to live in like a dystopian like kind of thing, dystopian scene you'd see in a movie where, you know, there's cameras absolutely everywhere monitoring you at every turn. And I guess now we're kind of at that point where we need to decide what it is we want it to do and what it is we don't want it to do.
And I think one of the best ways to sort of combat that would be transparency. When you look at, like, when you think about taking, you were saying, a driver's license picture, even though most people don't think about it, like, until you just said it, I would never have thought about it. But you know that, like, you almost have an option. Now, not necessarily in today's society where cars are such a huge part of our lives, but you do have an option as a citizen to not get a driver's license. So if that transparency extends, like when you go to put your face in your phone to unlock it, if it says you are, like, by doing this, you're essentially giving us your face to attach this profile to this extent.
Yeah, I think if they gave that notification, I think a lot of people would be hesitant to use it. But at the same time, you can imagine maybe we have a system in which you can use that technology, and there is some kind of agreement or some kind of law in place where they can't use that information. You can safely use your face to open your phone, you know, just using an easy example here, to open your phone without any worry that they are using this data for other purposes. So there's a lot more in terms of, I guess, privacy concerns, but I guess just to be a little more uplifting and look at some similar uses for this. So facial recognition is just kind of one form of
image recognition.
Yeah, I was looking for a better term, but image recognition. Yeah, where you're using you know, some sort of AI or other algorithm in order to parse through an image and figure out what's in there. Obviously, sometimes you're looking for a picture and you're trying to find like where that picture's from. You can reverse image search on Google. That can be very useful. Or if you want to find a bunch of similar pictures to another picture, you can also, the reverse image search on Google will also give you that. That can be very useful. One that's very good is healthcare. So if you have to get like an X-ray or an MRI, CAT scan, all these other things, there is a radiologist, a specialized doctor who reviews that and goes through and looks for a broken bone, cancer, whatever it may be. But it's very time consuming and sometimes mistakes are made. And I know that in healthcare, they're developing the ability to kind of have just a pre-vetted or like a pre-processed result where it can pick up whether or not you have a broken bone, whether or not you have cancer, or at least suggest that it's there. And it might help fill the gaps for, you know, certain things that the radiologist may not pick up on. It might be able to help them go through it more quickly. That one's, you know, maybe not the best use, but definitely the use case of filling in for when a doctor might not pick up on something is, you know, a really, really good example of how image recognition can be used. Obviously, it's not the well, it is face, I guess, if you're looking for you know, skin cancer, but otherwise, just general purpose image recognition.
But there is one problem with facial recognition in that way, and that kind of would it wouldn't necessarily make it impossible to use it for that purpose, but you also have to remember the fact that as these technologies are developed, obviously over time, people are going to be working on these and they'll get better and better. But as you start out, you may see many examples of cases where the AI isn't always perfectly able to predict what, you know, or I shouldn't say predict, but perfectly able to see what a patient, you know, what conditions a patient may have. And in something like healthcare, where 99% accuracy is still not enough, because, you know, that means one out of every 100 patients you're going to be wrong about, you have to really take time to develop these technologies. And considering that many companies are going to be using it for other possibly harmful purposes, it's even possible that the researchers who are developing these helpful algorithms could get caught in the crossfire, you know, if people are protesting against it or anything like that. So I shouldn't say protesting, but, you know, as people are trying to put an end or enact laws against research in such a controversial topic, a lot of things could happen.
Sort of on that note, the idea that people doing good research could then have their research weaponized for like a bad use. You see this situation, and I'm taking this from a video I watched on the subject. You take the idea of good data in the hands of bad people, or bad data in the hands of good people, are almost just as bad.
I think that almost is like the perfect. That should be like the title anytime someone talks about facial recognition. Good data in the hands of bad people. Like, what are the cases? Because, like, I think that sums it up very well. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, because, like, you do see where bad data, where, like, right now the facial recognition industry, so to say, is rife with bad data. We see a lot of examples of it. Just with, like Ben was saying before, with how you need to so carefully represent like different groups of people facially to get accurate outcomes from that are like unbiased outcomes from your AI. So we're seeing the cases of bad data a lot, where those groups aren't accurately represented in the data, and therefore we end up with a situation where the AI is biased in one way or another. That same video that I took that quote from was looking into using facial recognition to identify BTS stars from fan cams, which are like when fans take videos of their favorite BTS star like out on the street getting Starbucks or something. And what it saw was that the data, because it was primarily trained on like people of Caucasian descent, it had trouble identifying like people of like Asian descent because it wasn't trained on that type of data.
Yeah, so just to get at this a little bit more specifically, you can imagine someone starts developing some kind of database, they're training an AI. Maybe they start out with just like, maybe they don't ask permissions of their friends, they use their friends on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and they train it based on those people. And then they test it against those people and they say, hey, these are pretty good results. Well, they just trained it on their friends. And unless their friends somehow represent everybody in the world, their database isn't going to create an AI that's actually very accurate. So maybe it's accurate just for that person's group of friends, and then once you branch out, it's not. Or if you train an AI and then you in America, and then you bring it over to Korea, in this case, it may just not give very accurate information, and vice versa. If you have developers in Korea who are making a facial recognition AI, and then they bring it into Europe, for example, it may not just be that accurate because there's over 7 billion people in the world, and it's pretty hard to get a good, accurate representation of that many people. It's a lot of people.
It might even be impossible if you think about it. Like, by the time you get to a perfectly accurate AI, you might just have had taken a photo of everyone's face.
Also, I'm only kidding around. I'm sure technology gets to the point where we're taking pictures so fast, or infrastructure, I guess. But yeah, you can imagine you take pictures of everybody, and then all those people are like, there's a whole new generation of people, and maybe they look different, 20 years down the line, and who knows? But that's
even image quality.
Yeah,
if you think about it that way.
Hey, on the other hand, face recognition is a good way, is a useful tool to protect your data. I mean, you can use this technology to search the whole internet to find maybe your image is leaked, or someone else posts your image on some website, right?
If you wanted to describe people using your image without your consent as the enemy, I think it gives you the ability to use your enemy's weapon against themselves. But at that point, it still means that everyone else is still able to search you based on your image. I would say that's a good countermeasure if the situation occurs, but I don't know.
Now,
that situation only occurs when people are misusing.
On that line, though, using it for like content protection, like if you have a picture, a beautiful painting that you made, and you post it to the internet and say, hey, look at my painting, you can use, I'll send you a digital copy of this painting for use on like your website for $10. And someone just says, I'm not going to pay, I'm going to steal the image. Then you could search potentially and find that person's website because it has your image.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So there's all these different... Oh, go ahead, Jinx.
There are two steps to training to use the AI. I mean, first of all, you need to use data to train AI. And second step, when you use the AI, maybe you don't need to send your data to the training data set. Right? Yeah, that's two separate parts.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So, for example, many of you may have found that when you take a picture in your phone, be it of yourself or a friend, your phone may actually start to identify. Look at all these pictures you're in, and it creates a folder for you. I realized that in my phone. I turned it off because I personally didn't want that feature. I also don't really take pictures of myself, so it's usually just of dogs. But
I have a good example. Yeah.
But yeah, you can imagine what Jinx just explained was if my phone has some form of facial recognition in order to determine my face versus someone else's face. And granted, this is just more general, determining a face versus not a face. But, if they could have that database and then still use that database to help me figure out who's in which of my pictures without then sending the data from my pictures into that database. Like, I can use the database and not have to worry, like theoretically, not worry about my pictures being sent to it. Now, I don't know if my pictures are sent to it or not. That's why I turned it off. But there is a way where you could, in some way, ethically source a training set for an AI and then use that AI without having to contribute your own data to it.
I have an example about how this works. So, for example, you have 3 million pictures from for training those images from a good source, and after you put those images into your algorithm, and your algorithm found, okay, if inside the picture, if the first pixel and second pixel can use to recognize a person, and then the training part is done, and then the service provider sends this model to your phone, and your phone uses this model to recognize people. For example, if you took a picture and the first pixel is green, second pixel is red, and your phone knows, okay, this is a guy, this is someone, let's call him A, and if the first pixel is not red, okay, that's another guy. So in the second part, you don't need to send your whole image back to the service provider.
Only as much as it needs to identify you.
No, I mean, the whole thing happens inside your hardware.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in the cloud,
yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
I see, yeah.
And then I couldn't get like snatched away by any third-party groups.
So,
for example, if you are using FaceTime and you are using a virtual background, you are using face recognition, right?
Yeah, it's going to have to identify, it probably identifies your face, and then whatever part of your body is attached to your face, and then just knows to mask everything around it. So, I mean, I think there's so much more that we can even talk about this topic, but we unfortunately have run out of time for today. I know there's a lot more we want to talk about. Before we do leave, though, I did just want to leave off with one instance in which facial recognition technology was used for what at least looks like a silly purpose from here. And I remember hearing this news story maybe 3-4 years ago all over. If anybody knows anything more about it, or if it was just a characterization across the sea, you can let me know. But I believe it was in Beijing. There was a case where people were stealing toilet paper. Sometimes that happens in college. That happens a lot. People don't want to go to the store buy toilet paper, so they go to a public bathroom. They just steal all of it and bring it into their own private bathroom. I guess they had an issue similar to that, and they used facial recognition in order to distribute toilet paper to people who wanted to use the bathroom. So I think this is a case of, I mean, you can, but why?
I mean, I have another example, very short. So in there, they put cameras in the front of schools. So when your kids enter a school, the parents will get a picture and tell you your kids enter the school, and here is a picture at this time. And when the kids leave the school, the parents will get another picture, tell them your kids leave the school at this time. Here is a picture.
Yeah, like, I get the utility. I get the utility. I get why you'd want that, but is it a little too invasive where, your picture is being scanned at every moment of the day and sent to someone? So that's, I think, all the time we have for today. It's definitely a topic I know we can talk more about, and I'm sure it'll come up more in the future because we do have more conversations regarding privacy. But hopefully today you've taken a little bit more knowledge or a little bit more perspective on facial recognition, what it can do, what maybe it is doing or will do in the future, and maybe you just have a little bit more insight as to what permissions you're giving to various facial recognition you may use in everyday life. So that's all we have for today. We have more tech talks in the future. We're going to be talking about a variety of topics. One I think everyone will enjoy, which would be how to build your own computer. I think a few of us have done that and can weigh in on it, the struggles, the highs, the lows, etc. But that's all we have for today. Stick around for more mentor lessons, a project showcase with Mentor Ben, as well as the Game Jam results and winners.